Mere conservatism.
You know, Cleve, even though you and we enjoy politics, I guess we enjoy it. We like talking about it.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of lively discussions about it. But I kind of get to the point where I cannot wait for the election to be over because I kind of just want some of this stuff to be solved. It's such a mess right now.
Sure.
And I can't wait for Election Day to come and go. But the problem is now, the way I've been feeling about it is that I'm getting the feeling that Election Day is going to be the beginning and not the end of everything that's happening. And I would really like it to be the end where we get a result.
Now, are you referring to the fact that the results will not be accepted on the day or following?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I think that almost no matter what happens, there is going to be a mess after the election.
Now, you need to understand, the Democrats have tried this before. See, I remember back during the George W. Bush debacle with Florida with the hanging chads and the ballots there. Mm-hmm. And I literally was on pins and needles thinking that they were going to steal this election. Based on those hanging in chads.
They tried. They kept finding ballots.
That's right.
I mean, oh my goodness, here's some more.
So this is just, to me, just a redo of something they tried then. They tried to steal the election.
Well, and I'm just worried that the way things are now, I'm worried about somebody going off the deep end, and I could see it happening on either side.
Either side. Now, we need to understand
I'm really
something
nervous
here.
about that.
We need to understand that is what they want. I hear people on our side saying, well, we're ready for this. We're ready for their insurrection. And they don't understand this is what they want. They have been trying, they meaning the progressives, the folks who've been doing the so-called protest and riots, they have been doing their darndest to elicit a response that they could then spin and say, see, you know, it's they are starting a civil war. This is what they want to happen. They need a crisis that way.
Yeah, well, and I think really, frankly, in our country, we've been in a cold civil war for several years.
Yeah, I would say that.
And
yeah.
it is, I just get the feeling, I don't like it, but I get the feeling that it's heating up, and it's not good.
So let's back down a bit. By the way, that's David Perry, and I'm Cleve Walker, sharing with you our angst and concern about the upcoming election, and I'm sure it's shared by many. And this is mere conservatism, but we're going to back it down a little bit. I want to lighten up the mood just for a second because you are talking about something that can really make me heavy-hearted. And one of the things, in case you're new to our broadcast, David and I are conservatives, but our conservatism is based on our faith. Okay, it's not based upon just social reasons. We have a faith, a deep and abiding faith, and therefore, for us, we don't want to really fall into fear, hopelessness, and despair because those things are antithetical to the Christian walk. So let's lighten it up a little bit, and let's talk football, college football. A lot of folks didn't think we would have any college football this time.
Well, yeah, I think that the college football season down south was probably the main concern that most people had when COVID came.
I agree with you. I mean, and it's funny that you say that because somebody will say, no, it can't be that important. No, it's kind of important for a different reason. Kayleigh McEnany was speaking at a White House briefing this past Wednesday, and she brought up the discussion about the Big Ten Conference's decision to reverse course and to actually have a college football season. They're going to start the weekend of October 24th, by the way. President Trump had really been critical about the Big Ten's decision to postpone its fall sports. And, and so his words apparently had an effect. And here's how she put it.
I just spoke with the president, and he wanted to thank the commissioner of Big Ten football, Kevin Warren, and all of the players, parents, coaches, and fans who wanted more than anything to play football. The president was happy to get this thing going.
Now, in all fairness to the Trumpster, he did weigh in on this and applied, some pressure to the Big Ten, saying, "No, we need to have college football now."
Yeah, well, he gave his opinion.
Well,
I don't know what else that he actually did, but
there was communication from him to the Big Ten officials. There was communication with his people, with their people. He was letting them know you're making a big mistake by not joining the ACC and the SEC and the other conferences, and they did. They made a huge mistake.
Well, there's no reason why, if the SEC can do it, that the Big Ten can't do it. I mean, just because the Big Ten can't hang with the SEC on the field doesn't mean they can't play football during the pandemic. I mean, they've come up with all kinds of reasons, and a lot of the coaches and things were saying in Big Ten schools and other places were saying these kids are safer here in the football program than they are at home or wherever else they're going to be.
Well, my point is this: college football is again a return to some kind of normalcy. Mm-hmm. And I want to tell you right now, the Big Ten jumped the gun because they were trying to be politically correct. They were trying to go with the flow of this fear mongering attitude that so many of the progressives want us to have. So they thought they would really be cool by saying, oh, no, we're going to be very careful. This is just a reminder that little by little, too slow for me, I'm sure, and others, there is a return to some sense of the nation coming back to some normalcy.
Yeah, and you can't underestimate how big of a deal that is to people.
It's a big deal.
When sports started and baseball started back, and they were doing NBA in the bubble. Supposedly, I haven't seen any NBA because it's not my thing, but it felt good. Mm-hmm. To have something somewhat normal. I mean, it really is a big deal.
I can't say how good
football,
it felt to turn on and see baseball being played.
Yeah.
That just felt really good.
Yeah, and so I think that stuff is important. Yeah. And this is the kind of thing that Democrats really don't want to see. Frankly, they want as much disruption
you got it.
Before the election as they can. The last thing they want is for things to seem normal after COVID. Yeah. They basically have two campaign points, which one is COVID is bad and Donald Trump messed it up.
Right.
And the second is Biden is nice and Trump is mean, orange man bad. So that's basically what they have. And if the COVID thing is taken away from them, the Donald Trump is mean thing is all they've got, and that's not going to be enough. They have to have the lockdowns. They have to have kids not going to school. They have to have people not playing sports. That's why, really in a lot of states, Cleve, they're still locked down. California is still locked down. I heard a stat this week, and I'm not sure if this is 100% true, but it wouldn't surprise me if it is, that half of the unemployed people in the country are in California.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Because, they're a big state, and they're still locked down. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's true. The thing is, they need to have it be abnormal and weird, and
they need a misery index.
They need that.
Right on November 3rd. They need that. You're right. They need so they can tag this on Trump, and they can also hopefully reduce the turnout for him because the enthusiasm they hope will be drained from his supporters.
Remember, L.A. County decided that they were going to cancel Halloween 8 weeks in advance, and this is the kind of thing that they're doing prematurely, saying we can't have Halloween because of COVID when we don't know what's going to happen in 8 weeks. Also, Halloween has everybody outside typically. I know you're passing candy around, but they had to backtrack that because people, even in L.A., aren't going to stand for something like that. But
well, I'm hoping
they have to do this.
I'm hoping eventually that we will have a civilian uprising where citizens will finally say to their people, enough is enough. We're just not going to stand for this lockdown. Many have and have been penalized for doing it.
And the thing about COVID is that COVID is still a threat, and there still should be precautions taken when it comes to dealing with COVID and what's happening with it. But, Cleve, it's looking good. I mean, it's gotten very good.
Yeah.
Everything is basically under control and fine. By the way, we never overwhelm the hospitals.
Right.
Didn't happen. Right now, we're certainly very far away from that being an issue. Yeah. We know more about the disease now than we did, and so we can better assess our risk and take precautions and things like that. We have a vaccine coming.
Right. Sooner than anyone thought possible.
Yeah. I think is going to happen soon. Now, the CDC chief guy is saying, this is not going to come until next year.
Right.
Obama, the Trump administration is saying he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not involved in it.
Right.
Which a lot of liberals are upset. Why isn't the CDC guy involved in developing a vaccine? Why would he be? Is he usually? I don't really think so.
No. And don't get me started on the CDC because I think that's part of the agenda-driven progressive moves.
Have you heard, by the way, a lot in the media about Operation Warp Speed?
No.
Why not?
Because they don't want you to know
This is a big deal.
It was a Trump initiative that's working. That's why they don't want you to. I mean, he said, we're going to do this. I'm going to take up a whole bunch of delaying things and stuff that holds it back, and we're going to get it done. Operation Warp Speed is working.
He's cutting red tape, and he's fast-tracking vaccines, which is a great move. So basically what they're doing is they are testing and producing simultaneously several vaccines.
That's it.
So that when a vaccine gets approved by the FDA, which they're working on right now, it's going to be available overnight.
You got it.
Literally the next day, they'll be able to start distributing these because they have already mass produced them. They're doing it right now. This is Operation Warp Speed. This is brilliant. And it is exactly what we need to be doing. But nobody wants to talk about a great Trump policy when it comes to addressing COVID-19 because they can't have any kind of success or normalcy.
Media is in the tank for the Democrats, and the Democrats cannot have Trump looking good in any way. Let's talk about science. The Democrats are all about science. Biden he recently got an endorsement from some type of science magazine or something like that. White House Coronavirus Task Force member Dr. Scott Atlas, a scientist, a doctor, he reacted to the censorship of one of his videos in which he criticized coronavirus guidelines. And he stresses the importance of allowing free thinking among scientists. He was on Fox News' Tucker Carlson when he made these statements.
Not only is it wrong in terms of the truth, it's also instilling fear into the public. And we are right now in a pandemic here. We have people who are so afraid they can't even function. We need to be able to allow the debates. We need to be able to look at people who can articulate the science, interpret it, take everything into context, and move forward.
YouTube decided his video was bringing into question settled science, so they won't allow it to be aired. I mean, think about
settled
this.
Science.
Think about this.
I hate that phrase.
Why? Tell me why, because there's a reason for you hitting them.
I hate the phrase because it's not accurate wording. Mm-hmm. Science is a field where you study things and you test things, and there's no such thing as settling science. So I just hate the phrase. I mean, it's semantics. But
it puts a finality that science is not supposed to put to things. Science is filled with theories. Science is open investigation. Science is questioning, but
discovering new things, new information, testing things. We do. I mean, can you imagine if they settled science back in the early 1900s and we never developed all kinds of new energy sources and things like that? I mean, you got to test these things and work on these things.
But they need settled science now, because any science that contradicts their narrative, any science, whether it's science that shows that global climate change is not man-made, it cannot be allowed in the forum of discussion.
And Facebook decides what's settled.
Oh, yes.
Isn't that great? I mean, this is it's really dangerous, Cleve.
And we're going to talk about that because that's coming up. Facebook and Google and all of those folks, because I'm literally, listen, they are so in the tank for progressives that they're literally censoring anything that doesn't fit the Democrat narrative. I mean, you try to put it on there, you try to post an article about something on there, and you'll get tagged instantly and fact checked with a reference to the correct information about the subject that you're trying to mislead people on. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. Well, I haven't ever been tagged, so I guess I don't post a lot of stuff unless I'm on the Mere Conservatism Facebook page. So maybe that's why I'm not getting tagged like that. But
an example would be on Tucker Carlson. They had a Chinese doctor whose name I will not try to pronounce, and she had definitive proof, she said, that China created that virus in a lab intentionally.
I heard about that.
And that the release of it was intentional. And she had proof, and she had scientific proof because of the genome that she said you can trace back to. YouTube won't air the interview or anything from it because it goes against settled science. It goes against the safety protocols. It will cause people to believe wrong things. David, that's one of the things that irks and worries me if I were to worry about something.
The flow of information is definitely restricted. There are definitely gatekeepers that are more interested, in my opinion, they're more interested in the narrative and being politically correct than being factually correct. You know, a lot of these things ought to be, they really should be out there and explored by people. The problem is, when do the gatekeepers start to become malicious. You don't know.
Right now is the time.
Yeah, I mean now it's happening. But just assume for a second that they do a great job only doing facts. At some point, you got to think to yourself, are they only letting me hear what they want me to hear? Doesn't anybody have that worry or suspicion?
I think so.
I mean, I think that a lot of people do, and you got to be careful about that.
I'm one of those people who believes that Google ought to be broken up. I think it is too large. I think that there needs to be some type of effort to break it up because it has a monopoly that is just, I don't know, gives them unfettered power to censor viewpoints and information that it danks as not weirdly, scientific or whatever.
Well, imagine what happens if what we talked about at the beginning of the program happens. There is a disputed election in some way, and people are arguing and don't agree, and Google decides that only certain information is allowed to be put out there.
That's it.
That could be what if they cut off Donald Trump?
And they can. And that's why Donald Trump is saying, well, we gave you a lot of leeway because you were once just a social platform, but now through your editorial approach and philosophy to viewpoints, you are now not that anymore. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to give you that break anymore. So it's just one of those things where, again, these are things that can impact the election in a big way. My man Bill Barr was in the news, and I like Bill Barr. He's not the most exciting guy to listen to because he's just matter of fact going to do his job. He was recently in an interview at Hillsdale College in Michigan. You know about Hillsdale. They do a great job with constitutional information and education. Anyway, at that interview, he had the nerve to criticize Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter.
Who can quarrel with the proposition Black Lives Matter, but they're not interested in Black lives. They're interested in props. A small number of blacks who were killed by police during conflict with police, usually less than a dozen a year, who they can use as props to achieve a much broader political agenda.
The uproar has already started, by the way, over that.
Well, and let me break that down just a little bit. Okay. He referenced less than a dozen a year. That is the number of unarmed black people killed by police, shot by police typically, in a given year. I think in 2019 it was 9, okay? That is not the total number of black people killed by police. In fact, there's usually around 250 a year because on average it's about 1,000 people a year are killed by police. Right. About half of those are white and about 25% of those are black. Black Lives Matter, they have I've noticed them changing now. So they don't just care about unarmed black men who are killed by police. Now they also protest for armed black men.
Any black
killed by police.
Death.
Black man's death. And this is why they do this, Cleve. Yeah. Everybody has pointed out, if Black Lives Matter, in other words, the lives of black people, there's no such thing as a black life, but the lives of a black person, if they matter, then you care about ones that are murdered, children that are murdered in Chicago or anywhere across the country in every circumstance. No, they only care about the ones killed by police.
That's what Barr says. They're props.
They're props. Yeah. This is why they only care about the ones killed by police, because what they really want is to tear down the state and destroy Western civilization. The police are a wing of the state. They are agents of the state. That's why they hate the police. Yeah. It's not about black lives. It's about hating the police because they represent the state and thus Western civilization. It has nothing to do with black people. It doesn't. Yeah. That is only their in to then criticize and attack the police.
And it's working for them because every place where the municipalities have gone through this defunding and this kind of thing, crime has skyrocketed. I mean, it's just taken off because there's not enough manpower anymore, nor is there the morale to do it. I mean, what policeman or woman in their right mind is ready to go in a situation that may put them in a public spotlight where their lives could be destroyed?
I can't imagine. I can't imagine being a police officer right now in the climate. Like I can't. It's amazing. I can't imagine being somebody that does that job, knowing that if you pull your weapon, you are going to be totally castigated and your life is going to be ruined. And if you don't pull your weapon, guess what? You're probably going to get clapped.
Right.
So they're in a very precarious situation.
This is why I'm hoping that more states will do. Georgia is doing this, and other states are considering it. They need to have laws to say, listen, if you kill a policeman or woman, if you assassinate them like they tried to do with the LA County officers, automatic death penalty, federal crime, well,
on the other hand, Virginia has made assaulting a police officer a misdemeanor. In some circumstances.
And if
they're going the other way.
If the Republicans can't run on that issue, and Trump is doing it. I mean, Trump doesn't mind being known as a law and order guy, okay? But if we need to do that for the sake of the police force, but also, again, for the sake of our nation and our communities, we need to do it. It's a great thing to run on. It's another thing that Biden is very weak on.
Yeah, it's not good. The Democrats have chosen their side.
Yeah.
I mean, they have chosen the criminals, frankly. Donald Trump has chosen the law and law enforcement, and I think that's a pretty good pitch for him.
Yeah, we talked about. Go ahead.
Well, I was only going to mention real quickly good things for President Trump. Another good thing this week that hasn't been talked about very much because it's a good thing. We mentioned a few minutes ago how Operation Warp Speed hasn't really been talked about because it's good for President Trump. How about the Abraham Accord?
Oh man.
Peace in the Middle East.
Well, we won't call it so far. It doesn't solve the Middle East dispute, okay? But it's the first genuine step taken that produce anything resembling a possible peace, or at least some type of understanding in that troubled part of the world.
The left hates it so much because not only is it a success for Trump, but it exposes how wrong they have been for years and years and years about the Middle East. John Kerry, I had a tweet that I was looking at, John Kerry on video talking about how there was no way there's any peace in the Middle East without Palestinian.
Yeah.
The Palestinian issue being solved. In other words, you've got to solve that between Israel and Palestine before any other places in the Middle East will come together. Wrong, not true. Here's the truth. Oh, they also said that moving the embassy to Jerusalem would make it a powder keg. That there was no hope for peace after that. That it would that the whole Middle East, the whole region would explode because of it. They literally used that word.
I remember.
No, actually, once they moved the embassy to Jerusalem, and everybody in the region realized, okay, Jerusalem is not. They're not conceding, okay? They're not going to concede land, this important land, to their enemies. Maybe we ought to find a way to come together because Iran is the big bad.
Yeah.
Not Israel.
Right.
Iran is the big bad. We need to get together, even with the Jews, to stand against Iran. That is really the catalyst.
I'm really glad you brought this up.
Obama picked the wrong horse in the Middle East. He picked Iran.
Every time.
And because he did, this peace deal happened. So really, because he was so bad on foreign policy, Trump was able to pull off this peace deal, and it's going to get bigger.
A very smart man agrees with you. Everything you just said. Jared Kushner, who was one of the architects of the Abraham Accord, along with the other people in the Trump administration, he was very key in that. And he gave his reason why he thinks this is so important, as you just described.
We studied everything that had been tried and that had failed, and he said, let's try to do it differently. And instead of trying to take on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and making that the panacea of everything, we took the steps that needed to be taken to show that there was real sincerity, but we showed that the Palestinian leadership is not interested in making a peace deal at this time, and we showed that Israel was.
So that was their philosophy.
It's brilliant.
It is. I mean, I love it.
We got this guy coming in here and actually not only did what he promised by moving the embassy, but he actually is doing something. He wants a result.
Yes.
So let's try something different, guys.
You explained it, and Jared Kushner confirmed that that's what it was. A totally different tact. You've been trying this for years. It ain't working. All it's been doing is putting Israel more and more on the defense, losing more and more territory, losing more and more security. Why not? Let's take advantage of the fact there are people in there who recognize Iran as a huge threat. Let's base it upon a mutual understanding that you face a mutual enemy, Israel and the Arab Emirates and other groups there.
It's a huge deal.
And it worked. And it is going to work. Trump is convinced others are going to sign on to it and come on board in that region. And again, the Democrats, the media, they don't want to even talk about it.
I hope he wins the Nobel Peace Prize. Not that I put a whole lot of stock in the Nobel Peace Prize, but this is amazing.
Well, if you're going to get one of those things out, I think a deal like this kind of qualifies to me to be a candidate for that.
When I happened to see a news clip of Wolf Blitzer interviewing Jared Kushner, and Jared Kushner was on to talk about this peace deal, the Abraham Accords, but Wolf Blitzer wanted to make sure that he bemoaned Trump's tweets. He was, I swear, he was interviewing Jared Kushner saying, please tell your father-in-law not to make tweets like this. And Jared's like, but we just did a historic peace deal. I haven't seen the tweets. I've been working on this historic peace deal. Okay, but tell your dad. Tell him that he needs to be nice when he's on Twitter. Gosh.
Well, I mean, I'm so glad you brought that up again. Another example of the media's effort to tear down even the great accomplishments of this administration.
It's impressive. I really, Cleve, I was pretty anti-Trump for a long time, and I was very critical of a lot of things he said, a lot of his assertions and all that stuff about the deep state and even his presidential bid. I wasn't a fan of it. This is great.
It's huge.
He has done some great things, and I'm real happy with his presidency.
He's doing great things domestically and as far as our foreign policy, something that's surprising, I think, everybody, not just you. Wow. We're going to end on that note because we need to end on a good note. Despite all the opposition.
We could go on and on, by the way, Cleve. There's so many things in the culture that we could talk about, in politics, in religion, because when we turn the mics off, I'm going to ask you about the biblical impact of some of these peace deals and what your perspective is on that.
And that's a whole big subject, and we'll tackle that. Listen, we want your input as well. Go to our Mere Conservatism Facebook page and follow the discussion there and hear the broadcast again, too.
Yeah, get it on Apple iTunes. You can subscribe there. You can see us on YouTube. Just search for Merecon Media, and you'll find us on YouTube, and we want you to interact with us. So, Facebook, too. I don't know if you mentioned that.
I did.
Okay, good.
So don't give up hope, and we'll see you next time for another edition of Mere Conservatism.